So my last video was actually my final for my lighting class, and the project was to recreate a scene from a TV show or movie. Now, we chose this specific scene because we already knew about the location that we were going to shoot at beforehand, and we knew that this scene was going to match up pretty well with that location. By having a location that already was very similar to the original scene, it was going to make things a lot easier for us as far as trying to recreate the lighting and recreate that scene one to one. So the very first thing we do is we take a look at the scene and we see what's going on with the lighting. So the very first thing we notice is there's lights directly overhead where the actors are standing. They're set to kind of a 5600 daytime temperature, and it's straight above, straight ahead, top-down lighting. There's also light at the end of the tunnel on each end, plus there's the flashlight that Brasso has at the start of the scene. So we've basically got three lighting things to worry about. We've got the main light, which is the overhead top-down. We've then got the lights at the end of the tunnels, and then we've got the flashlight. The next thing we do is go to the actual location and scout it out and see exactly what we need to do and what equipment we're going to need to recreate that lighting. So the first thing we notice is there's no outlets anywhere. So we're going to have to go battery powered for our lights, which luckily for us was not a problem. Next thing we notice is that the tunnel is aligned with these lights, which makes sense because obviously it needs to be lit up. You don't want just this dark tunnel. But obviously that could create a problem for us because we don't want a lot of excess light. In the original scene, there's light where the actors are and there's light at the end of the tunnels, but there isn't light in between. So we're a little bit worried about that being a problem, so we're going to plan accordingly for that. The next thing we're not entirely sure about is how much light is at the end of each of the tunnels at night. And we kind of just go into it assuming there's going to be no light so that we will bring enough equipment to light the scene if necessary. And then one of the biggest hurdles was figuring out where are we going to mount our light. Obviously in the original scene, it's directly above, and we could set it up on a C-stand, but the C-stand's going to be kind of big and could get in the way of some of the shots, so we're trying to figure out, can we mount it to the ceiling? And luckily enough, there was pipes that were running along the roof of the tunnel, so we just used a single Cardellini clamp, which is basically just a clamp with a pin on it that allows you to attach lights to it. And then we weren't entirely sure how much spill our light was going to have on the rest of the set, so we wanted to bring in some negative fill just in case, because the scene is very contrasty and the lighting is very direct. There's not a ton of spill, so we weren't sure if we're going to need to cut that out or not, so we're like, all right, let's get negative fill just in case. So all in all, when we go back to create our lighting plan, we've got three lights because we've got the one overhead, one on each end of the tunnels. We've got two cutters to cut out the lights that are already in the set, and we've got negative fill to add some shadows onto the actors. A lot of equipment, to say the least. There's just a lot of stuff going on. And then we need obviously the Cardellini clamp to mount the light onto the ceiling. So we've got all this stuff planned. We've got all this stuff, and we get all the equipment, and we get to the set, and we start setting up. And we're looking at the lighting, we're trying to see what's working, what's not. And we set up the main light first, and it looks fine. And we're noticing there's enough shadows, so we don't need the negative fill. We're able to position the actors close enough together and far enough away from the lights in the tunnel that it's not spilling onto them, and we're getting good contrast, because the lights themselves aren't actually super bright. And then at the end of the tunnel, there is light that's coming from the adjacent parking lots that are on the end of each side of the tunnel. So really, we only ended up needing one singular light. We'd planned for three lights, cutters, and negative fill, and it all ended up being a single light and a Cardellini clamp. Now, the hardest parts of doing this whole thing was pretty much just mounting the one light, because I had to get up on a ladder, attach the Cardellini clamp to the pipe, and then attach the light to the clamp, which is a little bit hard to do because you kind of need two hands, but then you also don't want to, fall off the ladder. So sometimes I'd have to rope my arm around the pipe and then tighten it that way. It was a little sketchy, but we got it done. Aside from the light, the other thing that was not difficult, but a little bit challenging was we wanted to wet down the set, because in the original, they're in a sewer, and so the ground is very wet and it's reflecting water back up, and it looks really, really nice. But we don't have access to a hose or anything, so we essentially brought a bucket and hoped we could find some source of water somewhere. Now, luckily, the tunnel is situated right between baseball fields and football fields, so we were hoping that there would be a bathroom somewhere that would have a drinking fountain, and luckily enough, there was. So took us a couple times to fill up the bucket and pour enough water on the set to get it to look the way we wanted it to, but ultimately it looked really, really good, and I'm super happy with how that turned out. The one thing I wish we did have was a little bit of haze to add a little more atmosphere, but we just didn't have any sort of haze or smoke machine with us. And then since the whole scene is only about a minute and a half, it was pretty much just a total of 5 shots where we had our first opening shot, we then had kind of that wide shot, and then each character had a medium and a close-up, and then we had the final 2 shot. So ultimately, it was a very simple shoot. And then as far as the editing goes, it was a little difficult, I won't lie. A lot of the audio needed some work, but overall, I was able to clean it up. I was able to make it sound really good. And the color grading, which was honestly my favorite part, wasn't actually super complicated because I have experience recreating color grades from movies because that's the way I practice color grading. I love to just sit down with my own footage and try and recreate color grades that kind of are similar to that footage. So all in all, this project that initially started out feeling very complicated, we're gonna have all this equipment, we're gonna have to do all this stuff, ended up being a lot simpler and turned out really good. So sometimes you don't need a bunch of lights and some negative fill and, all these elaborate setups to get good looking images. Sometimes it's just about using a few pieces of gear really well and really effectively. With that being said, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next video. Bye-bye for now.